This is the story of a barrel maker. You know, the guy who makes barrels. He lived in a little tiny house with his wife and an old grandfather, and he worked a lot. Night and day and night, but as hard as he worked, he just didn't have enough money to make ends meet, and they were very, very poor. Well, one day the barrel maker found behind his house an old run-down barrel. Well, even an old run-down barrel is better than no barrel at all, he said. So he rolled it home and asked his wife to clean it. Well, she scraped and scratched and scrubbed so much that barrel began to shine. But just as she was finishing cleaning the bottom of the barrel, the scrubbing brush slipped through her fingers and fell. And you know what? Maybe you won't believe me, but it is true. All of a sudden, that barrel was full of scrubbing brushes. Yeah, the more you took, the more there were. Wow! Well, what did our barrel maker do? He became a scrubbing brush salesman, of course. And it worked real well. He sold lots of scrubbing brushes. And with the money, he bought himself a bigger house and a garden, and fruit trees, a chicken coop, a pig. And there was so much fruit on those trees, and those chickens were giving so many eggs that every morning he ate some fried eggs and jams and jellies that his wife made him. Every once in a while, a little slice of bacon. Nobody was talking about the poor barrel maker anymore. Everybody was talking about the portly brush merchant. And one day, the brush merchant had just made a pretty good sale of scrubbing brushes, and he was handing over some change to a customer when a coin slipped through his fingers, fell to the bottom of the barrel, and all of a sudden, I don't know if you'll believe me, but it is true, that barrel was filled to the brim with coins. Yes, the more you took, the more there were. Wow! What did our brush salesman do? Well, he became a moneylender, of course. And it worked real well. Yes, he lent so much money. And with the money he made, he bought himself a huge house, with a great big amount of land around it, and horses and cows. And he bought himself some really nice furniture and some Yves Saint Laurent clothes and Gucci shoes. He was now eating off of golden dishes and drinking in crystal glasses. Nobody was talking about the portly brush merchant anymore. Everybody was jazzing about the richest banker in town. But it wasn't enough for him. He wanted more. And as the barrel was continuing to spew forth its coins, well, he had to gather them up. But he had confidence in no one. Well, himself, eventually. And maybe his wife and old grandfather. So he gathered up all those coins in the morning, and his wife in the afternoon, and his old grandfather all night long. And if ever the grandfather did not gather up enough coins, or if ever he fell asleep while getting those coins, well, he was sent to bed without the least amount of anything to eat. And one night, the grandfather was there gathering up his coins, and he felt so weak and so tired that he started to nod off. And as he nodded off, he leaned forward. And as he leaned forward, he slipped, fell down into the barrel, hit his head, and died. And maybe you won't believe me, but it is true. All of a sudden, that barrel was just filled with dead grandfathers. The more you took, the more there were. Oh, what was our banker to do? Well, he had to bury them, of course. And as he was the richest banker in town, well, he had to have these great big ceremonies. So hundreds of undertakers were lined up in front of his huge house, and they had these great big funerals and hearses with silver lining. And you know what? That cost a lot of money, hearses and ceremonies and funerals and undertakers. Our banker had to sell things off quickly. He sold off his Gucci shoes, and then his Yves Saint Laurent clothes, and his golden plates, and his crystal dishes, and the land, all that land, and the horses and the cows, and his house. He even wanted to sell his wife off, but she said, "No way." So he didn't. And when the last coin spent with the very first sale of that very first brush was spent, the barrel shook and then exploded into 1,000 pieces, and nobody ever heard of it again. Well, until last year, that is, September 2008.